is not believing, especially in the age of artificial intelligence.
The technology itself is neutral.
The possibilities are endless and a little frightening.
When you think about the catastrophic potential to public trust from deepfake attacks.
A viral fake picture followed by a real dip in the markets Monday.
There is another front on this war tonight, disinformation.
AI being used as a propaganda tool.
We are way past the point of no return on this.
We're not going to get rid of it. It's not possible.
Everybody's like, we need to get a handle on this problem. We need to do something, but nobody knows what to do.
Thanks for coming along. Can you hear us okay? We're going to speak very loud. We'll just briefly get everybody to introduce themselves. I'm Tony O'Sullivan. I cover misinformation and tech and dystopia for CNN. Let's start here, yeah.
Hi, my name is Amruta Deshpande. I'm a senior researcher at Graphica. We're a firm that uses advanced technologies to map social media conversations online, and we help our clients get insights that are actionable from understanding complex social media space.
Hello, I'm James Verbis. I'm an AI engineer at LinkedIn on the anti-abuse AI team. My team uses AI models to detect and prevent many types of abuse on LinkedIn's platform, including fake accounts, hacked accounts, content moderation, and some types of automated activity like data scraping.
I'm Nick Dufour. I work at Google Research as an engineer. Our team is called Media Integrity, and we're interested in any cases where media is being deployed to deceive or to mislead someone. So anytime that occurs, we're kind of interested in understanding how and why and kind of the mechanisms behind it.
Hi, I'm Will Corvey. I'm a program manager in DARPA's Information Innovation Office, and I'm the current program manager for the Semantic Forensics effort, which is our flagship program for the detection, attribution, and characterization of malicious and synthetic media.
Hi, I'm Matt Turek. I'm the Deputy Office Director for the Information Innovation Office at DARPA. We focus on building disruptive technologies in AI, cyber, and secure and resilient systems.
And so, Matt, can you tell us a little bit about the DARPA program and specifically Semaphore, and just very briefly how DARPA brings together industry and also academia and everything else?
So DARPA's investment in this space actually dates back quite a bit. It started with Dave Dorman, who is a program manager in I2O back in 2015, when he conceived of DARPA's first program in understanding AI or manipulated media. And since then, that was our media forensics program. And since then, we've made another investment, our semantic forensics program that I started and that Will now runs. These are large research investments that DARPA makes to help fund researchers in academia, industry, not-for-profits to develop some of this disruptive technology.
So I think let's get straight into what it is you're disrupting. So, I mean, all of you are very much kind of on the front lines on this, whether it's at the companies or at a place like Graphica. Can you talk us through, Amruta, just some of the, I mean, as people would have seen in that video there, people are familiar with the kind of the fake Pope, puffy jacket image, that sort of thing. What are the more novel or other uses of this technology that you've seen bad guys doing?
Okay. So in the last few years, we've seen a bit of an increase in usage of some of the more advanced technologies, such as, deepfakes, a generated persona. So there was one particular operation wherein like a very well-established group that does disinformation online started using synthetic persona online to spread their messaging because it was more in line with the audiences they were trying to reach. They ultimately got caught because the words they were asking the synthetic persona to use were translated. So the translator wasn't very good, unfortunately, so the videos ended up being less effective. But this was a very easy way for a group to sort of reach a much larger audience with the level of messaging that they were trying to create.
And so these were videos?
Indeed, these were videos.
and synthetic audio as well?
Yep.
Okay. And what was...
Well, synthetic videos entirely.
Yes. Okay. And what was the nature of the campaign? I mean, what's the goal? Can you say...
Yeah, absolutely. I think they were spreading politically divisive content to just... One of the things you see online often in disinformation is one of the goals behind it is to just sow chaos. I think we saw this in the 2016 election interference work. They would basically find existing political differences and sort of amplify them to create dissonance and create chaos.
James, at LinkedIn, tell us a bit about what you're seeing in this space and how AI is being used, whether it's in disinformation campaigns or phishing attempts or anything else.
Sure, Doni. So I think the most prevalent area where we see AI-generated content used for abuse is in profile photos for fake accounts. So as I mentioned, my team owns many different types of AI models to detect fake accounts. So that could be, when you register on LinkedIn, your registration is scored to prevent fake account creation. Once you're on LinkedIn, there's many models that look at behavior to determine if it's fake or inauthentic and take action. So one of the things we noticed very early after the first AI-generated photo techniques were created in 2019, so StyleGAN was early 2019, we saw within weeks fake account attacks that were leveraging StyleGAN to create these fake accounts with synthetic professional-looking profile photos. All the photos were unique. And the reason a bad actor would want to do that is they can create a large population of fake accounts, each with a unique photo that you can't do a reverse image search, you can't do clustering. So it increases the authenticness of an account. So fake accounts in general on social media and on professional networks are kind of used to do other types of abuse. So if you wanted to, at scale, do spam or scams or bot scraping of data, you'd create a lot of fake accounts and then use them to commit the abuse. So we focus a lot on proactively detecting and stopping fake account behavior. And AI-generated content is no different. So early in 2019, we saw this. We knew that this was going to become a bigger issue. So we started taking steps to build models where we could proactively identify and ameliorate cases where people are using AI-generated photos. And we've come a long way since then. We've established a collaboration with an academic group at Berkeley. We've published a few papers and on novel techniques that are sort of cutting edge in detecting AI-generated photos. And we've deployed these solutions in production and effectively are able to detect this content.
And so, I guess a lot of folks here might be familiar with that website, This Person Does Not Exist, which a few years ago was, really one of the first stunning, facial creation tools available to the public. I've seen montages of like hundreds of those faces, and when they're put over each other, I think the eyes are always in the same position or something like that. So, you can quickly, I guess, build models that can pick up on stuff like that. How quickly are you seeing the bad actors innovating to try and avoid this detection?
It's a great question. And in fact, our first paper we published was targeted at those types of synthetic photos. So GAN-generated photos in particular have these symmetries where the eyes are always in the same place. So you can build simple, very effective detectors for that. Of course, bad actors will innovate very quickly. So in one way, they'll translate or crop or augment their photos to try and evade detection. But also some of the more recent developments in AI photo generation, like diffusion-based techniques, do not have those symmetries. So you need to develop techniques to detect that as well. So in those cases, we found using convolutional neural networks and sort of fine-tuning them for our purposes works quite well. And we recently released a second paper talking about an older production solution we had that was able to detect both the GAN-generated photos and the diffusion-generated photos.
And Will, I mean, I think you might be able to talk us through a little bit of the programs that DARPA and their partners have developed. I came to visit you guys last year. It was actually a few weeks after there was that terrible image of the Pentagon being blown up. I'm terrible in the sense that it was a shitty deepfake, but we saw how powerful that was, of course, because in line with some verified Twitter accounts and everything else, it quickly spread. You tried then, and I will dare you to try now, to explain to a layperson like me how I was asking you, and with some of this technology you talk us through, I'm like, why don't you have a heat map? Why can't you tell us in these images where the fake bits are? But that's not necessarily how the detection tools don't necessarily work the same way as the human eye does when it comes to images, right?
Yeah, so we're a government research program, which means we created first a framework where researchers could address many different parts of the data analysis space that's relevant for forensics. So we have a lot of people looking at images, and we'll talk through a lot of that. I think there's actually a video we can show us sort of the workflows that we're putting these things into, but also audio, video, and text analysis. And so for image particularly, right, we have sort of two types of tasks that we might field. One is for synthetic image detection, so things that come out of GANs or diffusion models. The other might be image manipulation, so things that we might do in Photoshop, and increasingly what we might see people do over the top of, in fact, diffusion or GAN-generated images. And so the heat maps really speak to sort of these features that might be more at the manipulation level, or if we're doing video analysis, sometimes we have biometric features that help us discern whether it's an authentic depiction of a person or not. And so if we are able to localize features, that can be quite explanatory. Otherwise, we try to talk about sort of the properties of the algorithm with sort of rich user-level descriptions about why this was picked up as being a particular type of generation.
And I can't really see that screen, but if they want to play the demo video there, as we speak through this a little more. Yeah, there we go. Do you want to talk us through this?
Yeah, actually, I think, so this is an example we may come back to later in our discussion as well. So this is one particular soft biometric model, so a probabilistic model of a person's facial movements as well as head tilt features that you can build up in a time series on authentic video, so that then you can tell that something like this is a deepfake. So from purely authentic video of Zelensky, at the time this was made about 10 hours of video. Now with significant software engineering effort, about an hour of video, you can build a model like this that then explains exactly which what are called facial action units, so characteristic muscular movements of the face, differ between expectation and what we observe in a deepfake video. So it's sort of one thing, right, to say this is a deepfake video, but I'm a black box and I can't tell you why, versus something that, as we've been discussing, is really explanatory to a user or a policymaker.
Nick, I think you just come back to the Zelensky video there. Just tell us a bit about the work you do at Google, and I think you also had a point to make on Zelensky.
Yeah, we started back like shortly after the original Reddit post about deepfakes by a since deleted account who coined the term, described it, and then just kind of left. And that was
like
the dawn of
was 2017 or so?
I think it was November of 2017.
Okay.
I think.
So this is when your team at Google started.
Yeah, we started investigating. And I think characterizing what's going on in the wild, you could glibly say more and better, where the rates are increasing, we're seeing more of it. And also the sophistication is increasing. And that Zelensky deepfake, the second one that they played, is particularly interesting because deepfakes in the original sense are neural network mediated face swaps. So you take video and then you change the identity of the person in the video using a neural network. And they always had this kind of built-in weakness, this sort of Death Star exhaust port, where if you could identify the video they used to make it, you could say, oh, here's the original, it's not the same person, done. But to my knowledge, that Zelensky video is the first instance of what appears to be bespoke filmed footage that was captured for the purposes of making the deepfake using a lookalike actor. And that represented kind of a significant change in the behavior of, I guess you call them deepfakers, and something I want to take special note of.
Oh, wow. So I didn't realize. I don't know if we can just play that video again, the demo video there, guys, while we're chatting. So that's the second Zelensky video in this. You're saying it was essentially created they actually had a person,
it appears
a
so,
model
yeah.
as such, and we're able. Okay, was there? I'm not asking a trick question here of the government people on the panel. Was that ever attributed to who created that video? Was that a?
I'm not aware.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that...
You're not at liberty to say?
No, it's actually possible that Google knows more because the visibility of the data that they have on their platform.
Come on, Nick, tell us now.
We do not know, as far as I'm aware, who it was. We noticed because someone on the team actually said, is that the shirt that Zelensky wears? He wears very specific, sort of these military shirts, and the shirt was different and the ears are different. There were several giveaways. But yeah, it was kind of a remarkable first.
And that's obviously more difficult to detect, or once you build...
Not for the kinds of methods that James was describing. So if you have these neural network models that kind of look at the pixels and say, there's some statistical phenomenon going in here that looks like a deepfake, then no, it's the same as any other video. But in terms of this weakness that I mentioned, where if you can find the video they used to make the deepfake, your job is done. You don't need sophisticated detectors. You can just say, oh, there it is, and be done with it. But if we see this large contingent of custom, bespoke deepfakes, those methods no longer work. We have to rely on detectors.
Amruta, we're speaking here about national security threats and threats to elections and Zelensky and everything else, but as Nick mentioned there, going back to the genesis of deepfakes as such, it starts with targeting women and harassing women online. And that's something as this technology continues to develop, the people who are targeting women are on the front lines of doing this as well. And I believe you guys have done some more research.
Yeah, recently we just put out a report and you can access it on our website, graphica.com. Like one of the things that people are doing now is now that deepfake technology is a little bit more easy to access. People can buy it as a service. There's undressing videos that have become popular. So this does not require an actual person to be there, their consent to be received by anybody. People just take clips of videos or images that they find online, and they're able to transform those pieces of media into videos where you can see people, where it looks like they're undressing themselves. And this is one example of CSAM, so child sexual abuse materials, and that's something we recently reported on. And I know that there's, this is obviously a very troublesome topic, but there's some work. I don't know if you want to mention the project that you're working on.
Yeah, so we had been able to work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children on a collaborative research demonstration around treating CSAM material, basically catching authentic and inauthentic examples of it and helping law enforcement workflows.
Yeah, and it's particularly troubling. So that we found about 34 accounts that were doing this, but they have tremendous amounts of engagement. So there's a whole industry behind this that's on the dark web as well as not on the dark web or in certain less popular social platforms, basically. And it's essentially quite widespread, and it's dangerous.
Yeah. By the way, we're going to open this for Q&A in a few minutes, so come up with some tough questions for these people, please. So look, it's all, we could pretend it's all well and good to say government is working with companies and companies are working together and you're all holding hands, kumbaya. But realistically, how, and maybe this is a question first for you, man, is how do you get these companies to work together? I mean, especially in the AI space there, Microsoft versus Google and everything else. Talk to us a little bit about how you make that work, not just now in this moment, but down through the years.
Yeah. I think DARPA sits in a particularly interesting position. So DARPA's been around since the late 50s. We've been investing in AI technology since the early 60s. And I think we have a pretty established reputation in the technical community. And that allows us to actually bridge some gaps and have some, what we talk about in terms of convening authority, to bring together a wide collection of research teams. So it is not unusual on our programs to have academic teams, to have industry teams, to have non-governmental organizations. And that's in fact what we had on the media forensics and the semantic forensics program, where we have folks like Google and NVIDIA actually doing research alongside academic teams, and then having folks like Witness, which is a non-governmental organization, come and participate. And then, longer term, and Will can talk about some of the plans, is to push that technology out to help create a commercial performer base, because long term, it needs to be not just US government that has this foundational technology, but it needs to be out publicly available, help create commercial industry. And all throughout the program, we're publishing research results, and I think, James would attest to this. Some of that work helps support things that LinkedIn did, for instance, or helps inform, burns down some of the risk on DARPA programs so that LinkedIn or Google or YouTube and others, know where to invest in the technology space.
Nick, can you just tell us a bit more about the work you do at Google and specifically, I guess, how is the work you're doing helping Google's users? I mean, in what ways do we see it when we log into Gmail or do a Google search, or will we see the fruits of your labor?
Maybe indirectly. So our work with Semaphore is around data collection, where we they had that video at the beginning with all the deepfake and different fonts, and this is my experience too. There's a lot of discourse about deepfakes, about Gen AI, and it's absolutely concerning, but I think that I don't want to call it hype, but that kind of discourse is motivated by its novelty, how suddenly it kind of appeared, and it might not be the case that the distribution of misinformation online, especially media-bearing misinformation, where an image or a video or something is used to spread a misinformation claim, that might not be dominated by Gen AI images. In fact, it's kind of hard to say what it is dominated by. So our data collection centers on characterizing misinformation claims, specifically those that have media, and we're kind of observing them by looking at publicly available fact checks. It's been 2 years now that we've been doing it. We have highly trained human annotators who go through these fact checks and look at the claim and look at the media that's present and read the fact check and kind of characterize the media based on that information. And we're hoping that it will be able to inform efforts like Semaphore especially, but really anyone who's in the space about where to allocate resources, what the trends are, how things are changing over time. And we've already learned some things. For instance, you can see, I don't want to scoop my own paper here, but you can see in the graph just this explosion of AI content that really didn't exist before the so-called papal drip image came out. But there's other forms that have persisted since before we have data, like context manipulation, which is a really common, continues to be a really common form of media manipulation.
So just tell us a bit more. So the research you're doing at the moment is looking at basically false claims online that have been fact-checked and seeing if any of those false claims or articles had some form of AI-generated misinformation, whether it be the media or the text?
Any kind of media, actually. Okay. So if they have, I mean, a lot of times it'll be from a conflict zone, like Russia, Ukraine, and it'll be a photo from a war 10 years ago, and they'll claim this happened last week. That's really, really common. We see it all the time. That would also fall under the purview. We're also collecting information about those kinds of claims.
Okay. And when it comes to the mis and disinformation industry as such, Has there been an explosion in AI content? And how much roughly does that account for from what you're seeing right now? I'm asking you now to scoop your own.
Totally fair. I actually don't remember the percentage. I want to say it's of fact checks that consider misinformation claims of the images, a relatively small portion is AI generated, order 10%. But you can clearly see the bump. And what's funny is if you just count the number of fact checks, you can see this explosion in January, February. But if you control for duplicate or fact checks that are addressing the same claim, the same image, you can see a smooth kind of bump that we're still in the middle of.
I mean, to Nick's point there, James, we are here talking on a panel about deepfakes and everything else, but in some ways, the images, the videos distract the media. Folks like me, in terms of the less sexy story, I guess, when it comes to just generated text. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you guys are seeing, whether it's coming to phishing or scams or whatever else, on how AI is being used to make very convincing outreaches on LinkedIn or whatever else you might be seeing?
Yeah, so most of my work is on images, and that's where we've seen the vast majority of AI-generated abuse. In terms of generated text, I think there are, of course, scams and spam and fraud, but often it doesn't actually require generative AI. There's humans behind the scenes that are interacting, trying to get people off platform potentially onto WhatsApp or Signal or Telegram, and a lot of scams happen there. One thing I will mention is that LinkedIn does publish transparency reports on the actions we take at some set cadence, and most recently, 99.6% or more of the scams and fake accounts are taken down before any members report them. So we're very proactive in identifying this, and with our AI models and with expert human reviewers, and taking it down.
Amruza, what is if you want to pull out your crystal ball and tell us what the future has in store, but no, what is the threat you think with this tech that we're kind of not talking about right now, that in 12 months' time we could be back here and saying, darn it?
A very good question. I think some things that immediately come to mind include sort of performing low-grade, low-tech scams, but at larger scale. I think that's one. We haven't exactly not been talking about it, but I think it still has the potential to surprise. As like when AI first came out, that itself was a pretty big. When I say AI first came out, I actually mean when OpenAI recently released their models and it was proliferated. That was a bit of a surprise to us all, right? It came out very quickly. It was adopted very quickly. And so in the same manner, I think low-tech scams going at scale will definitely be something to look out for. But on the sort of more high-tech side, I think we might get really, really sophisticated AI-supported sort of attacks, scams. So if I may use like a personal anecdote to illustrate, my husband gets a lot of like phone call fraud. So he gets a lot of elder scam calls, actually. He's been getting them for like 2-3 years now, and we've been listening to them and interacting with them, and we've sort of seen a progression of how they've evolved over the last 2-3 years. So initially, they would actually be humans on the phone, like trying to screen if he might be like a good candidate for their scam. After a while, you started to see bots doing that initial screening. So they'll just call and see like, do you have Medicaid? And then they'll try to, follow up with a human as needed. But the most sophisticated example we came across was, it was pretty clear that there was a chatbot type thing behind the program. Actually, even before that, we came across a voice that was AI generated, but it like tried to sound very human, like it would stumble and it would like take big gasps as people would. So there's some work on audio quality. But now back to this chatbot thing, like it clearly sort of took my husband's responses and interpreted them in some reasonable way. and would sort of respond. So, for example, it was anticipating that if he were old and he was having trouble getting his credit card, it actually said, "That's okay. Go take your time. I'll wait for you. Go get your credit card." And it also anticipated that he might not understand exactly where to find the number on the credit card, so it took the time to like point out to him how to figure that out. But it was bad at handling, it couldn't handle everything. So it was easy to sort of for us to ask the chatbot questions that it couldn't respond with. But this kind of illustrates to the point is like, you can build fairly sophisticated, complex infrastructures in the background that would help support sort of, that would not only just help monitor, go through a particular fraud scenario like the Elder Scam one, but it could also try to personalize attacks to the individual that is being targeted. I think we can certainly all agree that, let's say, your social media account might have a lot of just general information about you that is public, and we can start to understand who you might be as a person, right? Like, who hasn't scrolled over Facebook to learn what a person is up to from their old social network kind of thing. And you can use just publicly available information to start to build a little bit more sophistication into these scams. And I think that's the one that's going to be sort of very complicated to tackle coming up.
And we're seeing that, of course, with grandparents being targeted with audio calls that sound like they're from their grandkids, again, and you can create that audio so easily if you have a kid who's posting on TikTok, any bit of their voice now, right? Will, what is it that, you'd like to dig more into when it comes to all of this? What is it you'd like to build next?
Yeah, so I think in this research space, there used to be a fundamental assumption that there was something special and different and interesting about synthetic or manipulated media. And I think now what we're seeing is there's such a variety of techniques embedded in normal online activities, right? So from grammar correction to style augmentation for text to bots that will now write emails that are being productized through certain startups to the list goes on and on. It becomes incumbent upon technology platforms as well as people who are trying to innovate in this space to help describe in a rich featured setting in an explainable way what authenticity looks like so that we can have more of a public discussion around there and inform policymakers about what acceptable and unacceptable behaviors might be in the online ecosystem. Because again, everything will signature as having been retouched by generative AI. And so it actually means it's time to dig in our heels and have more analysis and deeper analysis, not kind of give up and say everything is going to be co-generated basically with an AI engine.
Right, yeah. We could have used that this morning with the Kate Middleton photo. But I want to open this up to questions. So I think we have a mic going here somewhere. But just back to the point you were making, Amrata, which was I had a situation recently where we were trying to get in touch with a telemarketing robocall company who were doing these scams. And we tracked them down and went to their offices. But I eventually got somebody on the phone that I thought was a robot, but was a real person. So I think that's called the liar's dividend now, isn't it? When there's just so much of this fake stuff out there. I mean, is that a concern? I don't know if you could tell us, but have you ever had a false positive in terms of you've shut somebody's account down because they look like they've been generated by AI, but they're actually a real person?
Awesome, Chris. So that's a great question. And in any sort of abuse detection, you're worried about false positives, because if you're trying to detect fake accounts, you could take down a real member's account. If you take down content, it could be, not abusive in the rare instance, and then maybe people complain or it gets more attention. So we aim to have very high precision models, which means when they make positive detections, they only make mistakes a very small fraction of the time. We do have ways for members to appeal decisions or write into LinkedIn and get this corrected when it does happen. We do try to take that into account in future updates to our models too, to make them better over time. And I think Will's point about taking into account the broader context, especially regarding the AI-generated content, is super important, because Everybody is now using generative AI assistants to help them write texts. People are beautifying their photos with AI tools that could perhaps create false positives if you're detecting AI synthetic photos. So if you can not only use the fact that it's AI generated or AI augmented as one signal of many of abusive content or inappropriate content.
I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yeah.
That you have mistaken somebody as an AI. Who's got some questions? Oh yeah. Hey.
Hi. As you know, it's the AI models are becoming more sophisticated at like an exponential rate, and it seems to me it'd be an arms race between the AI generated image and the deepfake detection. Is there anything that we can do to sort of mitigate this as a problem instead of just being a big arms race finding a different solution to that?
So I think we have two reasons for optimism, both of which have been evaluated in recent years in this program and in many other academic settings. So first, the innovation that's happening within AI is exponential and amazing, but it's also predicated on many of the same technologies as previous versions. And we have good evidence that you can use training data, so deepfake images or whatnot that have been generated from a previous model version, and actually leverage those for detection of current models. And we saw that specifically around the StyleGAN face generation, but other places as well. The second is that we have an approach within the broader tech ecosystem where we have a defense in depth. So we're not running one analytic, we're running multiple analytics, many of which have orthogonal features that they're looking for. And so that gives us more than one look at and an opportunity actually to fuse across those features to get a better result. So I think as long as we can support together a good defensive ecosystem, we'll continue to have an advantage on the defensive side.
Joan Donovan.
Yo. Really interested in the panel. I'm Joan Donovan. I've been researching this stuff quite a while now. What I'm really afraid about isn't the this person does not exist type of AI, but real, true identity fraud. We're talking about people who are taking your biomarkers, your whatever we want to call a face print or a voice print, and utilizing that. And in the startup model, there doesn't seem to be any way of preventing this kind of AI from taking your entire identity and potentially upending your world. We see this happening most in high schools, where classmates are making AI pornography of young women. We see this in our politics, where if you do look for deep fakes of any female politician, good, bad, or indifferent, they tend to exist. Where does the policy go here if we're not taking seriously the fact that this is already a violation of law and these technologies keep getting deployed and there's absolutely no sanctions? And so beyond ethics, what must be done?
Who wants to take that?
So from a technological perspective, I will just point out that we've had a great deal of audio work in the past couple of years. And there is, in fact, one small company, EduWorks, that has a product out for detection of deepfake audio and in particular voice cloning attacks. So we do have defensive technologies that have been demonstrated. Getting those sort of out to the public, I think, continues to be both a scaling factor and just an outreach effort on their part and in other companies operating in that space.
Yeah, I'd like to plus one the need to keep defensive technologies up to date in audio, video, images. One other vector that I think is going to happen very soon, or maybe in some cases it already is liveness detection and ID verification, where you might use an app where you have to show your ID and then maybe rotate your face around. You've probably had this experience, and what they're doing is they're comparing the photo in your ID to your live face, and then it's validating your identity. it already exists that there's AI techniques to do face swaps live. So you can have a fake ID or get the photo, construct the fake ID, and then face swap it onto you live on a camera and validate your identity that way. So technology, you can use similar to technologies to what what the DARPA programs have developed, what we've developed at LinkedIn to detect that type of AI-generated face swap. But I think keeping that up to date and then leveraging those tools to proactively identify it can help.
There is one other thing that you can do. So you can be proactive and essentially poison the data that you're creating. So this takes advantage of some of the adversarial machine learning approaches. Another DARPA program actually created a tool called Glaze, which you can apply to images, which really interferes with machine learning algorithms' ability to learn the style and appearance and stuff. So there are some techniques that are starting to be developed that you could essentially embed on top of the data that you're creating that would make it difficult for an adversary to learn from your data, to learn particular features, learn particular styles.
Yeah, and I think we can really bolster some of these efforts, keeping things up to date, et cetera, with collaborations, specifically doing threat sharing, data sharing, incentives that will encourage companies and developers and researchers to come together and continue this sort of effort.
Yep. Hi there. I kind of a follow-on question in the sense of, do we have an understanding of the impact of the proliferation of these tools? Joan also mentioned some micro examples of targeting individual people, high school students, politicians, and identity fraud. And I'm wondering if there's any research that either y'all are involved in or you can point to help people better understand how do we quantify the impact on people's finances? How much money is being stolen with financial fraud using these tools? Do we have an understanding of how these tools are impacting public opinion around elections? Do we have an understanding of people are trying to game markets using these tools? Anyone who's on Twitter could tell you that the sort of coin environment is filled with bots that are trying to do pump and dump schemes. And I'm curious if we have a better understanding now of really what these tools are doing and if they're impacting people in significant ways.
And I will just, I'm ready to just, I think to the point you made earlier, but also to Joan's point, which is that a lot of people won't sit up and pay attention until this has some big impact on an election or something else like that, but it is already ruining, we don't know how many, but particularly young women's lives in schools all around the country. And that's obviously a very difficult thing to research because it's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about, but it's also something that we're probably not investing enough time as media, as researchers, as government, as everybody else in actually giving a shit about it. And the platforms are pretty bad at this, at removing this stuff at the end of the day, unless somebody kicks up a stink. So what does have to change? And if I know somebody else was volunteering to answer there, but open to you, but any of you.
Okay, yeah. So to answer your question about how prolific this is, I think efforts like what Nick described, a data collection effort that is monitoring the different ways in which media manipulation is being used. We've been engaged in a parallel effort, which is characterizing fact checks, basically all reports we find online of either misinformation or disinformation. And there are other databases actually that have been collecting more detailed reports as well. I think all of this is helping us understand the scale and the widespreadness, I suppose. It's global. So I don't know that we have the right collection of information to be able to normalize correctly and to really truly give a number to this. But I think we are certainly understand the depth, the breadth of the sorts of things that are going on out there. Yep. And Nick, if you want to add.
Sure. I didn't have a good answer to your question. It's a different kind of thing entirely than what we usually experience, which is either you're producing it to update people's beliefs about the world in a way that favors you or to decrease the usefulness of a communication channel. Things like AI porn are just to cause harm. They're targeted harassment, targeted bile. And it's not clear to me that there's really a grasp on how to think about it just yet. And the other point that I wanted to make about the amount of harm, perhaps the monetary damages, I do think that right now there's a degree of arbitrage happening in terms of the effectiveness of these techniques, broadly speaking, might be partly motivated by a lack of understanding on the part of the audience that these tools exist and can make things like this. So a clear, not necessarily low-hanging fruit, but a fruit nonetheless is just increased education.
And if I can touch on the follow-up you made to Joan's question with respect to what has to change, I think like one thing maybe I want to highlight that's currently happening in the semantic forensics program is the sort of thing we want to aspire to. So in the recent year or two, we've really been increasing focus on getting the technologies that are developed in the hands of end users. So people and analysts like work at Graphica who are going to want to use these technologies to do their work faster and better. And yeah, it's actually very challenging once you've solved a research problem. I'm definitely from a research background, and I think maybe Nick and James can agree with me. It's quite challenging to take a research product and make it something that someone who wants to use it can digest the information from that comes out of it, as well as like use it effectively. That's surprisingly difficult, and it definitely needs attention and a lot of, it needs resources and effort behind it. I think that will be quite a bit of help.
Yeah, thank you for the research that you're doing and distributing that out. You've talked about some of the tools and techniques for defense against these bad actors. Are you ever concerned, though, about publishing those results and having those results be used by the bad actors themselves in this kind of spy versus spy escalation?
Yeah, we absolutely are. So I can comment on the profile photo models, which we have published a few papers about. Typically what we've been doing is actually holding back on the latest and greatest. So the production models we're using are a generation or two ahead than what we're sharing publicly, precisely for this reason.
It's a bit of a catch-22, right?
So maybe I would just call it a tension. So we like to have as open a research environment as possible because we have really strong worldwide engagement in this research area, and we don't want to stifle that. We also do have counterforensics expertise within the program that helps us advise us on sort of the risks, because of course any publication does give someone a hint as to what can be done, but there may be certain types of algorithms that are more vulnerable than others to sort of immediate defeat if they're published. And certainly our research communities academically and commercially are aware of those constraints as well.
And perhaps a little bit of good news there is that even if something gets put in a paper, it's not very actionable immediately. You need someone with a high level of technical understanding and expertise to go in there and use that information to modify some technology that's being built. It's not a simple process to go from there to creating the counter response, essentially.
That's great. That's a great question. Do we have time for one more? Oh, it looks like you have a follow-up. No?
I just know that I won't use the eyes in the same spot if I were to generate a new image. That's something I learned. Okay. So I'm using it right now.
Right.
Not that I'm a bad actor.
You mentioned some software that could be applied to sort of poison the data, but that sounds very high level, and most, I think, like lay people wouldn't understand how to apply that. Are there, in your opinion or expertise, practical steps that people could do today to minimize the amount of damage that their data could be leveraged to create, or minimize the amount of exposure that their personal information could turn into?
Is there anything a person can do other than not be on the internet?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there's a silver bullet here, right? There are good cyber hygiene practices. There's a lot of information out there about those sorts of practices. I think you want to be thoughtful about what you put on social media, where you share things, what permissions you use. Those tools, while they sound complicated, and I'll admit I haven't used them myself, actually, I believe have been downloaded hundreds of thousands of times. So there is a growing community. I expect you might see commercial industry pop up to make very easy to use tools. What if it was as simple as applying a filter in your app on your mobile device so that an image that you created either had some digital provenance information so we understand where it came from, or maybe it has some of this adversarial machine learning noise patterns embedded in it to limit the way that that large-scale machine learning could be used on it.
And one of the things we've done at LinkedIn, and other social networks are doing this as well, is enabling members to validate things about their identity. So for example, we have, in the US, we have the ability to use Clear, the vendor Clear, where you validate your identity and it shows as a badge. There's other third-party vendors we use elsewhere in the world. And we also can validate your work history using work emails and email domains. So, one thing you can do proactively is opt in and do that. And then also, when you're interacting with someone else, see if they have also done it, because that adds some level of credibility.
Thank you so much, guys. I think that was a great question. It also just reminds us that we're all a bit vulnerable, aren't we? I mean, even if there's a tape of you out there speaking at a wedding or something, that's your audio. So on that jolly note, have a great South by Southwest. And thank you, guys.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.